The country is now engaged in a debate around land reform. There are a lot of analysts who have been giving their predictions on future of land reform in the country. Looking into what the current debates means for the ordinary community, the laymen like me and you, Africa Bora. To give us listeners a bit of background, why is it important to discuss this issue? On the line, we're joined by Setou, Chief Executive at Vumelana. Simuso raki go amogetse. Mogaetsi go le jale una le nna Vumelana. It's a non-profit organization that helps beneficiaries of the land reform program to develop their land in an effective and sustainable way. Setou, briefly explain to our listeners what happens to Vumelana organization.
Okay. Thank you. Vumelana is a non-profit organization that helps communities or beneficiaries of land reform to develop their land. We do this through funding advisory services, which are really aimed at structuring commercially viable partnerships between beneficiary communities on the one hand and investors on the other, so that much needed jobs can be created, income and skills can also be developed and transferred to these communities. Our work is really complementary to what the government is doing in developing rural communities and ensuring productive use of restored land. One of our key objectives is to really demonstrate the value of community-private partnerships as a contributor to successful land reform.
Now, le actor as batseregani, khotsa le actor as an independent body whose main mandate re botsa gore e tswa kae ibile e tshegetswa ke mang.
We are a non-profit organization, as I've said. We've got a board of directors, a diverse board of directors chaired by Dr. Francais and other prominent South Africans. We work with skilled advisory teams who are really assembled per project. And this would include people with legal, deal structuring, and community facilitation skills. So it depends on the nature of the project that we are supporting. The projects that we've supported thus far are in the agricultural sector, in the ecotourism, tourism sector, and in the forestry sector. So those are the sectors that we've supported to date. In terms of where we get our funding or rather our support, as I said, Vumelana is it's actually a legacy project of the erstwhile Business Trust.
Erstwhile Business.
The erstwhile Business Trust. During the advent of democracy, when we got during the early years of our democracy, big business and government came together and formed this coalition, which was really aimed at looking at development, really supporting government with this development project. One of the projects that the Business Trust actually supported were in the land reform space in the Bushbuck Ridge area. Now, the Business Trust was always meant to be a finite process or a project. So when the Business Trust actually closed down, Vumelana was formed to really focus on assisting beneficiaries of land reform. So that's what we've been doing since 2012 to date.
Now, why ke botsa dipotso di le jana ka gonne go important go itse information ka ofela ka re ra tla re lebelle ka go ga go na le sengwe se se diragala mo country 2 seconds later go na le mokgatlo o formilwe jaanong fitlhele gore batho ba ipotsa gore gabe go le go diregang ka gonne if ne go na le legitimacy e rileng nkebe le gore without any gripe or in that's what it's gore batho ba ba teng mo lehatsheng la rona ba dira di project tshwanetse go na le networking tse jana tsa bone go na le di workshop tse jana or motlhamo ka gonne e le ko le tlhakore le leng la the northwest khotsa ko Mpumalanga jalo ke ka mo re sa itseng ka yone or ka gonne the advent of the statements le gore di tletse mo di news tsa gore yanong land appropriation expropriation without compensation. Now everybody comes and let's go ka ra rona.
Vumelana in nothing. We have to date supported and concluded 15 partnership deals, which tend to mobilize in excess of 580 million rands in investments. So actually create in excess of 1,000 jobs, and this will impact on in excess of 15,000 households. So these are the deals that we've concluded, about 16 of them. In addition to these 15 partnerships, we've got a further 18 partnerships that we are currently supporting, which once concluded are likely to mobilize in excess of 2 billion rand, and create much needed jobs. And as I've said, our projects are in various parts of the country. We've got projects in the Eastern Cape, we've got projects in the Northwest, we've got projects in Limpopo, we've got projects in KZN. So we have been around. So our track record
speaks for itself. Now Setou jaka o farologane le ba bang ba ile gore ga ba khone o tlhaloganya how big is the project according to assets and monetary values. Ra itumela re file tseo. They itumedisa. Now I can reverse scenario, a simple scenario ya gore tla kere mo lefatsheng X ne go batho ba buang gore le hatse le re tsetswe ke batho ka bonokwane jalo le jalo ba fitla jano ba fitla ko project ya lona ya NGO ba re ba gaitso re na le all the documentation rata go le re tshegetse le re thusa gore le hatse le re tla re le bone a le atla le thusa mo those type of environments khotsa it's an entity that looks at rona re batlo investor rona re batla gore re fe thuto re tshegetse gore mebereko e beteng le bereka jang
taki riana e tlhagisele baka le botlhokwa le bateng Yaka Vumelana, renale a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform. This MOU renale Sabaka it was signed a while back in 2013 or so. We have, as a result, been supporting a number of projects jointly with the Department of Rural Development. So to respond to typically a community and so on. One of the first things circle dirang ke rekera kopo ya mofutongtsenya le go lebella so santla gore ka nnete batho ba ba le fatsolena a gona le title deed, it's a stable a community, because as you can imagine most non-stability, even investors but remember Vumelana, what we do, we mobilize private investment. So mobilize a private investment there's a huge demand on the government fiscal. For everybody to rely on scarce resources we must remember there's only one pot. It's not as if there are 20 pots. This pot must fund education, it must fund social grants, it must fund every other social program that you can think of. You know. Now, we decided we will step in and assist communities in mobilizing private investment so that the land that has been transferred to the beneficiaries of land reform can be put to productive use. So, her approach to a community secondly, again, the project support because it's also very important, and I must emphasize this point. It's not each and every project because we are an NGO. Otherwise, if we were to take every project data our way, we very soon would have to close down. So we are choosing. We select the project that we support. The project that we support, broadly speaking, we'll be looking at projects that will create a favor jobs, a bare minimum about 100. We are aware for more the Tabin or in land restitution in particular. The previous owners, the jobs so one of the things that we can do is favor the existing jobs and over and above that to create new jobs. So whether we will be able to create those jobs and issues around stability, etc. Those are the things, as I've said, that we look into. Secondly, is this a project would it be possible for us to actually create or introduce commercial or negotiate commercial arrangements and actually close deals? Because the minute that people, before even the first million rand lands into the bank account, people are on each other's throat, people are fighting, etc. So those are the things that we need to. And lastly, we're looking at projects that can have a demonstrative effect, because and the reason why we are doing this is purely, as I've said, that we want to demonstrate the value and the impact that community-private partnerships could have, particularly on the success land reform in this country.
Jano re ke go botse ra rona gore ga le tsoga moso le utlwa ka resolution e phasiwang jalo ke makoko a dipolotiki kgotsa lekoko le le mo pusong le bua gore land expropriation without compensation e tla diriwa. Lona jaaka le NGO a gona le se le gore le ka khalema kgotsa la fitisa jaaka thuto ya gore jaaka mo president a buile go le ko parlamente maabana khalema rem maimane gore no ga wa utlwela sentle ke buile ka re jana le jana lona ga ne e fitla kgang e le ka re fa thuto e fetja ka baagi
right so tla mo le ya like re khanya dio especially the issue of expropriation of land without compensation ke khanye in the debate around land reform have now taken center stage in the country. Different parties having really divergent views on approach that must be followed and how to ensure that we redress the imbalances of the past. Because if you look at the current debates, they're really around how do we ensure that we redress the imbalances of the past while at the same time ensuring productive use of land. Now, our view is that this is a process, rather, this is a conversation South Africans must have. You know, forever. However, it is important and crucial that all the role players and stakeholders, including all South Africans, must thoroughly engage with this process. This process, in our view, has to, among other things, take into account what is it that has worked, what is it that hasn't worked. This will further require, in our view, a multi-pronged approach, for lack of a better way, that acknowledges that land reform has both rural and urban dimensions. Not just rural. There's rural and urban dimensions, and these are there could be approach to, and further consider the dynamics of restitution, redistribution, as well as tenure reform. So it is important that the outcome of all these deliberations that are going to ensue must be a solution that really works for the country and its people. And getting back to the approach that we say it must be multidisciplinary, it must include, amongst others, community-private partnerships as part of the mix. And we believe that community-private partnerships really present opportunities in addressing the current land reform challenges. And as I've said, let's explore what has been done to date, understand what has worked, why it has, for example, not worked, gain insight on really why has it not worked, so that whatever solutions that we come up with must be based on sound research. And perhaps lastly, just on this point, whilst it is envisaged that expropriation without compensation may result in the increase of land that gets transferred to the previously disadvantaged, the reality is that all these challenges that I've been talking about, i.e. that our people do not have access to finance, they do not have access, they do not have the requisite skills, they don't have access to markets, all these challenges will not be addressed, such as the unproductive use of land, It requires the skills, it requires the capital, it requires access to market. So capacity within the state to administer the program also, it's one of the things that we'll have to address. So these are our view, and our intention as an organization is to really engage with the process. We are aware that there's a constitutional review committee that has been formed in Parliament. We are more than ready to actually engage that constitutional review committee to share with them our experiences as Vumelana, to really offer some of the options that they should consider, to really share with them our experiences up to thus far. So that's really what we are saying. And we are encouraging particularly ordinary South Africans, because, amid all these debates that we are hearing on newspapers, reading about on newspapers, hearing on radio and television, for me, really, the absent voice is the voice of ordinary South Africans, the voice of beneficiaries of land reform. So the role of the media is of critical importance to ensure that organizations such as ours can actually share some of its experience, and can also encourage our people to engage with this process such that it is not viewed as an elitist kind of process, for lack of a better way. Make sure that it's inclusive and the solutions are geared towards actually addressing the needs of South Africans.
Now, Setou, are lebella jaka motho ka kentse ku utlwa ka kuri ya go gore it's kana issue tsa land is part of your DNA. Now, a ke re botse ge gore in your own view, what role can the private sector play in the land reform ecosystem and within the current context of the discussion on land reform?
Look, we must understand that the private sector, actually all these parties need one another. Government needs the private sector. The private sector needs government. The South Africans in general, they need the private sector. Understand, I mean, the issue can be the rate of like the really, but to on the skills, harina access to finance, harina madi, who's only on the resources starting, they are not infinite. A lot of other demands on the government's fiscal. Now we've got the private sector, which has got the requisite skill set. They've got access to finance. They've got access to markets. I mean, take a situation where we have the necessary support produce some stuff. But vegetables or they are produced because they don't have access to market. They are not even of a standard sale over the market. So this for me is the role of the private sector really could play. And based on our experience thus far has been that there are a lot of private sector players out there who are really willing to play a constructive role within the land reform space. And I think we must explore all these avenues.
Okay. Now, Setou, just on a parting shot, ke tlo botsa potso kakaretso fela gore o ka thusa ba dikgwebo potlana. Ka gona re itse sentle fela gore go madi a ntshiwang ke government ka ba to the ranta tsa bo 2 billion for small business upliftment. Me ga o lebella 80% of that 2 billion ya tle failure sa itse gore e feletse kae. 20% ele gore ya khona go tswella. Ebele gore yone e 20% eo ga e kgone go access the very key point e o bileng ka access to markets go tsa go akopele. Now government a boele gape a boele ko kota engwe a ntshana ra 2 billion. It's the same way all this democracy khalemo ele ka e fang towards government a dira dilo tse siameng fela go sna accountability go tsa a monitoring system or somehow to rebuke people with love and respect to say you cannot be spending so much treasury isa madi go khalemo ele e fang jaka mekhatlo e ikemetseng ke eng re Setou?
criteria right so ka gore rona re le Vumelana thata re focus on land reform broadly. That's the market is carrying very this is where we can make a huge difference. But I mean the issues they raising they apply across the board. One of the challenges and probably a key ingredient in successful land reform is good governance. And the same applies to small businesses. And it is important for really puso, really the small businesses, really the CPAs, communal property associations and trusts, dedicated to be involved in the land reform space. Or issue good governance and transparency. Because for as long as it's not good governance, there's good governance. For example, in the land reform space, we have CPIs or CPAs. We have, for example, the constitution, the constitution, but something that keep the record of Tabone, the Palo Tabone, the Kipe, but the books by the Sekoba Runing, so that the Kono you are the audited financial. But color back up my babu eleko batum baba chalusiti kore. Baka it's more than one of the cheleter in that way, it's sort of very significant transparency because a lot of times the reason why only infighting even among CPIs because only the pelaelo to batani chelete rightly or wrongly. So for us that's one of the most important parts. And as Vumelana, one of our key interventions, particularly more the CPAs. Once the government support a CPA, or government conclude a deal, haribwele ko morago le re tsamaya. Part ya process e re ilang re lebella gore re ira tse ka se dikang need analysis. Or eng se tila the CPA ka tse ka se tlhokang ka fa go ka mo phatela go ka ba support. And then the deal to conclude. The Kaderaka to Sakadi governance, Reta Shore, Banali policies in place, Reta Shore, Bacola Bacafolo, those policies, Reta Shore, Bacacola, Conali Catabo, Badi Sahor, Dilo, Rugiwa, and then Bacola Badi Copanoli, the members of the report. So the same thing should, in my view, apply to SMEs. Governance, Tupelelo is very, very important. Currently, the program, there are a lot of good programs that we've got in this country around Hokarupella, the SMEs, for example. I mean, just to address your point, the SMEs. But the challenge, these interventions are so fragmented such that so there is a need really to relook at the interventions how can we make sure or some linkages so that the SMEs, for example, they can benefit properly from this, because currently you have company A another initiative, you have government initiative, you have another parastatal initiative, but they are not well coordinated. So we need to better coordinate the efforts that can support our SMEs. The same thing applies to your CPAs. We need a coordinated fashion through which we can begin to address Matapa the CPIs, the CPAs, so that they are in a position of they can be responsible citizens, but they can run a pila, higher Kamosori, but was you mafats. Elekamosori, Halo, Tal, Tyra, Trekere, Mota, steering wheel, Umwatena, Kamola defense, Perimontu. You know, these are real things that are happening. So we need to make sure that we come up with some interventions so that Batuarona Bakastamarana Biotabone in a much more sustainable manner.
Okay. Mogaitsurke remote Pisanonjalo, Momahale, Le Repita Setou, Chief Executive of Vumelana. Rona, Nako Kisera, Karata, Horinka. Le tsharlotle fela go batho ba utlwileng gore le teng nomoro ya mogala ga ba rata go itse ka botlalo ke eng
batare email would can the website.
Aha.
The website I think works a lot better. www.vumelana.
Vumelana.org.za.
Yeah.
E tla tlhagisa le di-projeke di-advisory fund ke jalo ra rona re pita Setou re ke go leboga kgosi ya me ke re a modimo go lerato a le baballe bilane le setse pula mahatso tlhale a segetsang a kanelo ke pula go ska ba le se o itse pula le gore tla senya e tsenwe setse sente ska le go lebetsa go leboga rra go le rona